Well, cool. I didn't really have like a solid agenda for us, but
No, you tricked me.
I kind of had a vague outline. I did have a
I
vague outline.
I had 80% of a solid agenda, and then you put that post today, and I was like, oh, he's got a plan. Let me
I have a
not
Yeah,
step
plan.
on his
totally.
I
toes.
do have a plan, but there's some interpretation into the word plan.
Perfect.
So here's what I'm thinking for today. I would love to spend a couple minutes like just going around the horn a little bit about like, okay, like what are some of the first things you do when you're faced with like a real problem? Not like a little, day-to-day annoyance or like thing, and maybe we could give some examples to be like more clear. But like faced with either like a life challenge or a career setback, right? Like actual things that influence you, your life, your trajectory, your life plan. I would love to kind of like dive in a little bit into what are some of the things that we each do, and then maybe like talk about what's effective or trade strategies, or maybe create a list. My end goal, kind of in my mind, is like a list of things that we can post. So share with the rest of the group. Say, hey, here's a bunch of stuff that works for us. Here's some stuff that doesn't work for us. And have like an actual physical output. I would say like some of the things that I tend to lean on the most are personal reflection time. Moving to Denver, right? Like I didn't know what to do. It was like, am I going to stay in my current job, or am I going to follow my partner out here? And how is that going to work? And like the first thing that I did was make time for myself to stop thinking about work stuff and create some kind of headspace where I could be like, all right, let me just jot down my thoughts. The next thing that like usually helps me is getting somebody else to think my thoughts. So like I'll have a mentor or like somebody that I trust to be like, hey, let me just put this in front of you. And what'll often happen for me, if it's somebody that I trust and like knows me well, is they'll say things like, have you thought about X? Or they'll be like, that what you just said, say that again but slower, because I think you're lying to yourself. Or like, are you sure? Right? So they'll be able to like put my thinking in context with my other thinking and be like, is that aligned? Is that really what you want to do? Because it sounds like there's this other part of it that you're interested in, but it's not really what I know about you. Just to start with two things that aren't really even action oriented. Like they're not even like, I'm not even doing anything to solve it yet. I'm just thinking about it, giving myself permission to like block other stuff out and getting a clear head. I think like defining the problem here.
I'm very reflective. I need to like internalize my feelings. That's one thing that I've learned is I need to sit in my feelings and actually feel it rather than like compartmentalizing it and moving forward trying to find a solution. Like you were saying, I call either my mom or my dad. I talk to my brothers. I have an arsenal of great women behind me that I pick up the phone and call and get their perspective. I have you guys now that has been absolutely just mind blowing in how I've grown the last few months. I have to explore all avenues. I need a plan A, B, C. I need to think through what would go wrong, what would go right. Like,
Yeah.
I really think through everything so that I'm not surprised.
How do you know when you've thought through it enough? I'm just telling you, it was 100% a trick question.
Piece of that too is that then in theory you have the same amount of time no matter the problem to think about it, right? And that's part of problems, is that some of them show up with the timeline on them, so you have to make a decision by a certain time, so you don't actually get all of the time you want to process.
One sign of effective problem solving is reconciling with yourself about a decision that might not have been perfect.
And then also continuously reconciling when that decision has been made and you have to live with it.
So I'm kind of hearing like the same things too, is in there's like that introspection, that personal time that we have to take, to think about stuff, and then bouncing it off other people, and kind of having those either mentors or outside perspectives to look at. Growing up on the farm, my dad would call it tractor time, right? So you have a lot of tractor time when you're out there cutting hay
Yeah.
all night long, mundane, you know, you just kind of able to get into your own head and think about stuff, which is good. And that's kind of what I do when I have a problem is I'll find those activities where I can just kind of zone out and think in my head, whether that's walking or, you know, a lot of times like in the shower in the morning, I try to do my gratitude and affirmations. And that's when I kind of ask, you know, the great spirit or the universe, like what, you know, what am I doing? Where am I going? What do I need? Or if I have a specific question, I'll kind of pose that then. But I think the physical location of where you're at when you're doing this is also something that kind of comes into play. Like the things I think about when I'm walking and looking at the mountains tend to be or have a different feeling than if I'm sitting on the couch or in front of my computer in my head. And then two, like you guys were saying, it's like when do you stop, right? Like when do you stop that self thinking and kind of put it out there, and maybe bounce it off someone? Because I think if you're just trying to answer your own questions all the time, you get kind of stuck in an echo chamber. But I think when you do that, you have to kind of be wary of what mentor you're going at with what questions, you know? Like I kind of found that just recently with, you know, talking with my mom and stuff about my personal development and stuff that I'm going through is like, sometimes you want that trainer that's going to talk to you and be like, no, man, you got to do this. You got to stay on this route. You know, this is the path. This is what you chose. This is what the things you decided you're going to do. Whereas if I take that to my mom, sometimes she's like, oh, you're doing fine. You're doing good. Give yourself a rest. You know what I mean? So there's definitely
Classic
like,
moms, man.
know your audience, right? So now
Oh
I'm like,
yeah.
okay, when I'm struggling with my personal development, I just can't talk to mom about that. I need to talk to this
Oh
person.
yeah,
You
that's
know what I
going.
mean?
That's a whole bullet right there.
The when to stop, I use what is called like the Ben Franklin T chart. I put a T in the middle of the page. Left side is plus, right side is minus, and I'll be brutally honest or whatever decision is about to happen. You got to be choosy on which mentor is gonna give you advice because they're gonna give you advice in the best light they see you as, not as what you feel for yourself.
Yeah.
The T chart allows my heart and my mind to get on one accord because sometimes my heart is spilling out all the minus and my brain is doing the plus, or vice versa.
I like what you're saying here. What you're saying is it's easier to decide something if you know your values. I'm just curious if you maybe can remember an example of a time where you had to use that technique and it helped you get through it, for better or worse.
I can relate to you of ours moving to Denver. I just recently moved within Denver. It's my second move within 3 years. And I was at the point to where it's like, do I want a roommate or do I want to keep staying by myself? And what they was asking for rent, I'm like, these are house prices. So it's like, okay,
Yeah.
do you want, it's like, how comfortable are you? Like, do you want your comfort to be the detriment of your happiness to where you're constantly grinding and that's not living? Or do you want to cut back a little bit, get a roommate and get back on the plan? Because I can fight for 15 years. That apartment would never be mine. I take a year off, maybe a year and a half off, get the credit right, build the cash up. I could be in my own brick.
Right.
So it was like, okay, it's a stranger.
Yeah.
Who's stranger? And to be able to be on a different part of town, to get out of my box, and nothing much really changes. It was just my comfort zone. So I had to make the decision, do I pay the cost to be the boss or make a smart choice and just be uncomfortable for a little bit? Because everything outside my comfort zone equals success. I mean, I could have stayed where I was at and I could have did it, but I didn't want to feel the emotions of stress. I didn't want to feel the anger of not having enough because my feelings are important to me. Because if I don't feel like doing it, it don't get done. That's just me.
One thing that I learned in medical school is that I am a hidden slugger, I guess. Uh, and what I mean by that, and it was through a conversation with one of my faculty mentors at the time, who's also a psychiatrist, and he said that when I'm faced with like a really difficult problem, I need some time to myself to kind of sort through my thoughts, because when I show up to whatever it is, the delivery of the solution for the problem, that I need to feel like I'm hitting a home run for everybody. Like I need to put on a show and I need to like let them know that it's like the most outstanding piece of solution that I could put forward. So we already mentioned how like sometimes solutions, even with all the best laid plans and the arbitrary deadlines and infinite amount of time, you still won't ultimately land on, you know, the perfect solution or the best solution. And I learned that me trying to figure out stuff by myself is something that I can do, but it's definitely not been the result of my best solutions. I like to imagine that I come up with the best solutions. I like to think that like I have the answers to the problems even when I'm put on the spot and I don't have time. You know, triage, decide, execute, save somebody's life. You know what I mean? Like the kind of like pressure cooker that I like to put myself into, like then performing at like a cut above, is huge. And in doing that, I tend to isolate. I tend not to reach out. And I have been trying to like change years of personal programming to rely on people that I know will, if anything, lift me up and strengthen me to be better.
So I don't know how, if like which way you sway with this way, whatever. But like for me, people are usually surprised to find out that I categorize myself as an introvert. Like I try really hard and I put out a ton of energy, but it costs something, right? Like ask Odessa. As soon as I go to bed, I'm out. Like it's like click, lights are gone, right? So as a
you cuddle with pillows, so cute.
Yeah, that's right. We all know.
Yeah, for those of you who are watching this later and don't know what that is, that's what's called an inside joke.
Oh no, I mean that's gonna be an inside outside joke. I believe we have copy on that picture, and I'm gonna put it right here in the middle of this video, just like overlaid.
Right. Just we're gonna show that real quick. As an introvert, I also identify with the idea of first seeking solitude. It's like, you know what it's like? It's like the fortress of solitude that Superman had, right? Faced with a big I can't believe this is what we're talking about. Faced with a big problem, and he locks himself in isolation. So like I guess now that I think about it, like how much of it is me and my impulse and how much of it is like what I think is like what I've been engineered to think is the way to solve a big problem, is that I have to like meditate on it, like for in my fortress of solitude away from my kryptonite and all that stuff. That's definitely the first impulse. And I think that that's helpful. I think maybe staying there too long without enlisting help or support, if you're in over your head, I think maybe like that's the assessment. Am I in over my head with this solution, and like being realistic about like, shoot, I know what I'd have to do, but it would take all of my time and maybe more than my time, and that is not feasible, so I will need to enlist someone else's help. Or maybe I could figure this out if I spend enough time thinking about it, but if I called somebody else, maybe they could solve it in a couple minutes.
That actually makes me wonder too about like the idea of fake it till you make it, which I kind of believe in, like some of the underlying principles of that. Like if I, you know, believe in myself, because if I don't believe in myself, who else is gonna? And I continue to believe in myself, then I'll continue to rise to the occasion and challenge myself to perform better and better and better. Where do you draw the line on faking it till you make it and being real and being vulnerable and being honest about what's going on? Am I gonna say this thing in front of this group of people because I know that this is like the right-ish sounding thing to say, and I'm just gonna not talk about like my insecurities and my vulnerabilities? I'll sweep those under the rug for now, and then I'll not address that because I'm faking it until, you know, I've achieved this like pinnacle thing.
Fake it until when? Like,
Right.
is it a checkbox? Like when is it? When did you make it? Because like that could really easily lead into like, I'm just gonna keep faking it. Like that's it. Like there's no.
Well, I think that's what people do. They just keep faking it. Yeah. My first reaction if there's a problem is like I always make myself like take a breath, because otherwise like I'll just take off and then I'll realize that I haven't taken a breath in a while. And so like I always try and do that. So I let myself, like, that first day is where like my brain can go dream. It can go to like 10 years down the line if I make this decision. It can go to like, what if I regret that? I let it go wherever it wants to go. And I just try and like stay present with where my brain goes. It usually results in me like laughing out loud at myself a couple times throughout that day at like the things that I think about and come up with. And then that's usually when I reach out for help. But I've learned over the years not to reach out for help on the first 1 or 2 days, because the people I just lead them through a crazy roller coaster of my brain.
First of all, it kind of like relates to some of the other things we've talked about today, but it's also like really clearly a process that you go through, not necessarily like a standard operating procedure that you follow this formula and this is what comes out. Like it just, you need to give yourself the permission to be like unbounded, like to have unbounded, unrestricted thinking, and let your brain kind of thrash, letting your brain go through that thrashing process. And then once you have something that's getting a little bit of traction, or at least you have an articulate way of describing it or clearing up the problem, now you're ready to enlist somebody else's brain to look at it and just like pressure test it a little bit. I love that. Could I also like take 2 seconds to like add some sciencey, nerdy, dorky stuff? You said I need to take a breath. When you take a deep breath and breathe out, and the rate of breathing in is different from the rate of breathing out, you can literally, this is due to the vagus nerve. So if you breathe in and you breathe out slower than you breathe in, you will reduce your heart rate. That is a thing that you can do to manage anxiety and stress. The back burner. This is my favorite thing that you said. You have to operate on your day-to-day, and you have to make decisions in your day-to-day. And if it's really, truly a huge, big, hairy problem, it could take up all your brain capacity. You can't operate like that. You have to do stuff. So you're allowing yourself to put it on the back burner, right? And you're slowly kind of like letting yourself mull over it and sort of monitor it, right? When it comes back up, you're thinking like, okay, how do I feel about it now? When it comes back, I'm actually dealing with a problem right now. That's the technique I'm using. I put it away. And then when it pops up in my brain, I'm like, okay, how do I feel about it now? What do I think about it now? It's like, there's no time limit on it, right?
Yeah, so following in on Brandon's idea regarding thrashing out your ideas, you know, I've been on the wrong side of that with my footwear startup, because I have a project manager who I talked with and managing, you know, my materials and design work and so forth. And he's the first person I go to when I have a concern or a design change I need to make before going to the manufacturer. There have been times where I would circumnavigate his opinion and go straight to the manufacturer, which of course would ultimately lead to them dropping our project out of lack of confidence in me as a leader to getting it off the ground. So I definitely understand the notion of, you know, going to someone else that's close to you that is used to you having your, you know, your bouts of mind running ideas and thrashing. You go to someone important, because if you skip that step, chances are the person you go to beyond that step will lose confidence in you as a leader and your abilities and will no longer want to do business with you. So I definitely understand that point, because I've been on the wrong end of that many times.
I'm glad that like there are other people out here that feel similarly, but also like have actual real world experiences that relate to that. And you can point that. Thanks for sharing that, Jesse.
Keep that in mind, that, you know, we all have these little different groups of people and friends that we're connecting with, and it's growing each day. But just, you know, just kind of remind people that, like, even though especially now it's easy to feel alone and kind of isolated, there are definitely people out there to listen to you and help you bounce ideas off of. So, you know, don't think that you're always alone out there. And, you know, having you guys has definitely helped make that more clear to me. So thank y'all.
That's a soundbite right there, man. I love that. Holy
Boom.
Smokes.
Corey always comes
drop.
at the end and he's like, okay, let me tell you.
Wonderful.
It's the truth, guys. I love y'all. I appreciate you.
I'm gonna press record right now. So FYI.
Sweet.
Before you press record, I just wanted to tell you I have to jump off in like 30 minutes because I have another work meeting and I haven't eaten or worked out. So sorry.
I'm just kidding. I'm 100% kidding.
Too bad I already pressed record.
Okay.
Now we get to see for posterity. That time that Dominique bounced the meeting early because of eating.
That's right. It's like the only
things.
time I think you've ever done that too.
I
plus
know,
the
right?
recording.
Got him. Track record starts today. So for all the homies who showed up for the first time ever, like, you know, whatever. Now you're just the same square one as everybody else. And Dominique's leaving early, so you look way better than her. Just kidding. She's setting an example for taking care of herself, and she's leading us to that holy promised land.
Take care of yourself, eat, and work out every day.